Light pierced through the eerie darkness, beaming from a watchtower as it oscillated from left to right. Two guards leaned against the rail of the tower, their guns strapped across their bulky frames as they discussed. Down below, light beamed from bulbs that were mounted on the heavy metal gates that guarded the station, barbed wires roping around the light. The station was the only thing that illuminated the darkness that swallowed that sector. Built far away from prying eyes and heavily guarded against potential enemy infiltrations, the station served as a base for the Earth military contraction firm. This base, in particular, held a strike team consisting of elite soldiers trained to perfection. They had a 94% success rate in their missions and were only contracted in high-end confidential assignments. They dealt ruthlessly and worked hand in hand to bring down multiple alien associations. The team, which was led by Captain Jonah Taver, had its own secret weapon, Kasa Lon. She was a pure-blooded female Krekel, a species known for its supernatural abilities, which included tracking, speed, and night vision. She was the point person in all their missions, and her combat experience was a bonus advantage. Having knowledge of Krekel military acts mixed well with the human military. To others, she was a beast of carnage and fear. Everyone revered her each time she walked through the hallways of the station, branding her battle scars like medals. But to her team, she was like an elder sister, always joking around while looking out for everyone. She sat in her quarters playing cards with the remaining members of her 5-man team. Ava, the sniper. Krieg, the demolition expert. Von, the strategist. And Trudy, the striker.
Your turn, you dimwit!
Krieg snarled as he hit Von, who sat beside him, scrolling through a transmission device that sat in his other hand.
I thought we agreed you'd put that darn thing down,
Trudy added.
Sorry, guys. I just need to know if the kids are okay.
He put the device down and began to shuffle through the bunch of cards in his hand.
You gotta stop worrying, man. The General already told us that the whole invasion rift was a false alarm. It doesn't explain why they haven't checked in today.
He pulled out 2 cards and slammed them on the pile on the crate, which they had turned into a table, placed in between the circle that they'd formed.
Checked in? You make it sound like they're in the military as well,
Trudy said, as she adjusted and prepared to play her turn. Von shrugged.
They like to believe they are, so I just play along. How old are your boys now?
Kasa asked. She sat across from him with one hand resting on her thigh and the other holding her cards out of sight from the others.
Kev's 8 and Junior's 12. They're so grown now. Also, checkmate.
Ava squealed as she placed her last card on the pile. The rest of the group groaned.
How is this happening? That's 3 times in a row now.
Krieg huffed.
Just admit it. You guys are terrible at this game. I grew up in a
casino. The rest chorused unenthusiastically.
Anyways, I'm done. I need to get some dinner down at the cafeteria. Hold on, I'm coming with you,
Krieg said, standing up sharply and pushing the upturned metal bucket he sat on off balance.
Didn't you just eat?
Kasa asked, as she packed the cards together.
Well, I got hungry again. You want anything? Nah, I'm good.
He nodded as he turned to Trudy and Von.
You guys? Nah. Think I'm gonna head down to Section 31 Alpha, and I want to see if there's a better signal there.
Von grabbed the transmission device again. Trudy sighed.
I'll stay here with Ka.
The sound of an emergency signal blaring cut her shut as the lights went out and red lights began to blink. Trudy and Kasa sprung to their feet as they all zipped up their uniforms. Von flipped the crate open and began handing out weapons as they circled him.
Trudy, Ava, both of you, need to head to third base and find the captain. Krieg, Cass, and I will take the right, left, and the middle wing. We'll reconvene at 30 minutes at shipment. Roger that, sir.
Ava said as she slid in the mag of her gun and cocked it before running out after Trudy. Kasa and the guys marched out through the other entrance. Outside, other soldiers ran around, most confused as they pushed through the dimly lit hallways. Krieg grabbed one of them, abruptly stopping him from his sprint as he pulled him close.
What's going on? It seems to be an alien invasion,
the man said breathlessly.
What? Where's the captain? I don't know. We were all asked to reassemble at first base before the comms went down.
He released him and turned to Von.
Did you hear that? I have ears, Krieg. No, you idiot. They went for the comms first. This is a sophisticated attack. I don't think splitting up is a good idea. We're not splitting up to engage. I need you guys to identify where the breach is from. There's no way they attacked all the wings at once. If we can find out what wing they're in, we reconvene at shipment, and then we strike.
Krieg nodded. Von turned to Kasa.
We're really counting on your tracking this time, Cass. I need my serum. It's in the lab.
He nodded.
All right, take the middle wing then.
Kasa nodded as she hoisted her pistol and walked past the men, walking close to the walls as she made her way through the hallway. The men following closely behind until they got to the end, where the hall split into 3 parts. Krieg crouched as he made his way to the extreme, Kasa following next before plastering her back against a wall that led to the west wing, while Von remained at the right. She turned to Krieg and then to Von as she lifted her gun to the side of her face.
All right, guys. We'll see you on the other side.
She nodded before kneeling and tumbling into the path ahead of her, landing beside the wall again. She paused for a while as she assessed the area. Most of the soldiers had already cleared that part of the base, so it was mostly empty. She took a deep breath as she began to walk forward. She kept to her right as she continued to tread cautiously. Up ahead, the lab light shone bright white, clashing with the blinking red lights that illuminated the rest of the passageway. She ducked behind a door and peered into a corner. The road ahead was still quiet and empty. She grunted as she turned back to the lab, which was just a stone's throw away from her now. The door was slightly open, clouds of cold steam escaping into the hallway. She ducked as she made her way to the door. She stopped suddenly as her heavy boots crunched the glass beneath them. She looked around sharply, the fin-like structures on the side of her neck flailing soft skin as she stood inches away from the door, the light falling on her luminescent green skin. Convinced that she hadn't raised any alarm, she rushed into the lab, keeping her head down as she made a beeline to the cupboard where her serum was stored. She stopped as her eyes came in contact with a corpse which lay still on the floor, eyes open as blood flooded the ground beneath him. Her eyes widened with recognition. It was the scientist in charge of her, Dr. Jaggers. She rushed to him and placed her gun on the floor as she held his body.
Oh no!
She turned to the left, where his drawer had been upturned. She picked up a file that had her picture on it. All his records had been stolen. Her eyes shot to the cupboard and she jumped to her feet as she grabbed her gun in the same motion. The cupboard hissed as she pulled it open, and chilly air hit her face. She searched frantically through the vials that sat there, picking some up and reading the labels. All her serum had been stolen.
Looking for something?
She turned around sharply. She could recognize that language anywhere. It was a common one shared among her species and the Shrudds, a vicious species which were former allies with the Krekels until they betrayed them during the war. The creature looked at her, a smug grin revealing hundreds of tiny pointy teeth hidden inside a mouth covered by tentacles.
Traitor!
She aimed her gun and shot multiple times, with green lasers pumping out of the barrel. The creature's movements were light as air, as it swerved from one corner of the room to the other. Kasa turned quickly to find it perched at the high end of a wall, guttural sounds erupting from its throat as it studied her. It was emitting a short-range signal, which meant the rest of its counterparts were close by. It reached for a telescope with its tentacle and flung it at her. She ducked quickly, rising sharply before aiming quickly for its head and taking her shot. The laser drilled a hole through the creature's forehead, and it dropped to the ground with a loud thud, smoke dancing from the reddened circumference of the hole. She ran out quickly, slamming the door as she made for the exit. She could hear the rest of the creatures trashing and pushing through the hall as they gained on her. She was the target of this attack, and she'd walked right into them without backup. She turned back to meet one of the creatures lunging at her, all its tentacles reaching out to grab her. She dropped to her side and slid through the entrance doors, the creature flying past her and landing off balance on the ground. She stood up quickly and grabbed a hose that hung on the wall next to a fire hydrant, slamming the doors shut and wrapping the hose around the handles as the remaining alien slammed against the door, pushing against her restraint. She wedged the top of the hose firmly between the handles. From the tampered see-through glass that formed the top side of the door, she caught a reflection of the alien standing up and shrugging off the debris off the wall it had fallen into. It rushed at her immediately. She kicked the door and turned, planting a roundhouse kick against the alien and sending it to the floor before tumbling and pulling out her gun, which she'd wedged into her belt. The alien shrieked as her laser pierced through its gut. It tried to hold in the black goo that poured out as it fell to the ground and cried weakly. She checked her watch before returning her attention to the door. The creatures were slamming hard against the door, and she knew her barricade wouldn't hold for much longer. She needed to make it to shipment and warn the rest. She ran through the west wing, pushing through doors and jumping over tables and other fallen objects. She heard the echo of the door breaking open. Without her serum, she wasn't fast enough, and she knew that by the time the creatures caught up with her, which they would at the pace she was going, she would have exhausted her energy. But facing them wasn't an option. Her gun wasn't fully charged, and the Shrudds were known for their power in numbers. There were at least 9 of them thrashing through the hallway behind her. Her only option was to keep running and hope she made it to shipment on time. She could already see the exit doors at the far end of the hall. Her skin shimmered with sweat as she groaned and continued running. Suddenly, the wall broke open in front of her. A Shrudd flying through the giant pieces of debris and dust. It spun in the air, its tentacles reaching for her. She swerved to the side, but not fast enough, as the spike at the end of the tentacle slashed her shoulder. She groaned as her hand latched against the wound and fell off balance. She brought her palm to her face. There was a pool of blood sitting in the cup of her palm. She glared at the creature hovering over her as the rest approached them. She reached for her gun, but the creature was faster, smacking it off her grip and sending it flying to the end of the room.
I am here to end you. Your kind has joined hands with the enemy. We will destroy every last one of you.
Screw you!
The creature yelled as it pulled out 2 ion pickaxes from its back, its muscular arms filled with scars. He was a warrior. Kasa sighed. This wasn't going to be an easy fight. He lunged one of the axes at her, and she tumbled to the left, grabbing a metal board blocking his next strike and pushing him backwards. As he struggled to keep his feet, she found an opening. She rushed to him and punched him before grabbing his arm and twisting it. He shrieked as his axe dropped to the ground. She pulled his arm over her shoulder and lifted him off the ground and over her body before slamming him on the other side of her. She turned sharply as loud shrieks called her attention. The other creatures had caught up to her. She let go of the alien and began to run. She made it to the door on time and slammed her fist against the emergency latch before pushing through the door. She turned and watched as a metal barricade slid down and blocked the rest of the creatures.
Kasa, over here!
She turned to find the rest of her crew in a safety hatch, waiting to close the doors. She began running towards them. A loud crashing sound stopped her, and she turned to see the emergency door had been busted open. Behind the warrior, A shrud pushed his shoulders forward, heaving as he glared at her. She began to run again. He chased after her, one step covering half the distance between them.
You've got to be kidding me!
She continued to run as fast as she could, panting heavily as she struggled to get to the hatch. She was already inches away from it when she felt the creature's tentacles wrap around her neck and pull her back roughly. She struggled against its grip as her legs flailed helplessly as the creature held her up. Ava pushed past the rest and ran to help, but a hand pulled her back suddenly. It was the captain. Kasa's eyes were etched with fear and confusion as she watched the captain pull down the lever that closed the doors.
Start the ship! We can't save her!
A silent teardrop trailed down her face as she gave up struggling and watched as the hatch whirred, lights beaming at the sides as it lifted into the air.
Those are the ones you fought for. The humans are nothing but backstabbers.
A tentacle wrapped around one of her legs and another around her arm and began to pull them apart. She screamed as she felt her limbs tear and her bones break bit by bit until her body was split into two. Blood splattered in front of the creature as Kasa went silent, her eyes wide open, but death riddled her frightened pupils. He laughed victoriously before tossing her remains aside and beating his chest.
Come now, brothers. We must celebrate our victory.
The other creatures shrieked and wailed as they all began to retreat. Ava perched by the hatch's window and watched as the creatures moved back, all guarding the warrior shrud. Her hand balled into a fist on the window, and she turned to the captain.
So we're gonna let them leave after letting them kill Kasa? I understand your agitation, Ava, but you must understand what's at stake here. We were surprised. We don't have the means to fight them right now. That makes no sense. Send me out there and see if I won't take them myself.
Ava felt a hand on her shoulder, squeezing lightly. She turned to Krieg, who stood behind her, eyes red with sober rage. She shrugged her shoulder from his grip and pushed him off.
What are you all so calm for? You saw what they did to her?
She turned to Von, who sat with a blank expression on his face, staring at the ground beneath him. She stomped towards him and grabbed him by his collar, pulling him to his feet as she glared at him.
This is all your fault. You sent her there alone and you didn't even know what was out there.
Are you really gonna blame me right now? He asked, his tone soft as always.
Who else should I blame, huh? You were supposed to be there with her. You and that asshole.
Trudy stood up and walked to them before breaking them apart. There were dry tears on her cheek, and her pale face was now bright red.
You need to calm down, Ava. Nobody is to blame for this. We need to honor her.
Everyone turned to Captain Tava. His hat was clutched to his chest, and a look of remorse was plastered on his face as he dipped his head.
She was a great soldier and a loving friend, and she died protecting us.
He paused, taking a deep breath, bringing one hand to his back.
Let's observe a minute of silence for her.
There was a brief silence as everyone hesitated for a bit. Finally, Krieg imitated the same stance, one hand to his chest and the other behind him. The rest joined in one after the other as they fell silent. The next day, all the officers, engineers, and scientists at the station gathered at the cafeteria, which had now been rearranged to look like a funeral home. They were all dressed in black. The members of her team were the first to give their speeches, Krieg being the only one to make everybody laugh and ease the sober mood, while Trudy broke down in tears. Finally, the captain got on the platform and spoke.
Today, we mourn Lieutenant Kasa Lon, a fearless leader whose courage and sacrifice defined our elite force. Her strategic brilliance, unwavering loyalty and selflessness inspired us all. Though she's gone, her legacy lives on in our hearts. Fair winds, Kasa, until we meet again.
There was a brief ceremony, and all shifts were called off that day, later in the night. Von and Krieg lifted her coffin on their shoulders. It was an egg-shaped structure, made of silver with a glass opening. Trudy, Ava, and Captain Tava followed quietly as they moved to the ejection chamber. They heaved the coffin into a chute and pulled down the lever.
Did you set a course? You know she's not junk. We can't leave her roaming through space.
Ava inquired.
I set it for Armda, a nearby planet. Population rate is low there. And the coffin should land at sea. She's fine.
Ava nodded, and they all walked out of the chamber. If you'd like to see the continuation of the Kasa Lon story arc, keep your eyes peeled for part 2, coming soon. Hey everyone, how's it going? I just want to say I've really been enjoying making these more kind of deeper, more dialogue-driven stories, just like this one about Kasa Lon. I feel it's more real, more warm. It just feels, you know? So I really hope you like this one and ones like this as much as I like making them. So just wanted to say that I think it's really, really cool, and I'm hoping to do more of them in the future. If you'd really like to help us out on this channel, please, if everyone could just like the video and like any other videos that you really enjoy, that would help us out massively with getting that algorithm moving. If you'd like to help the channel even further, you can always subscribe, which is always helpful. And if you want to stay notified, just remember, you can hit the bell. Yeah, if you'd like to submit your own stories, feel free to do so. Let's try and keep them below or maximum 2,500 words so we can keep with this short story sub-niche that I've kind of crafted for myself. That would be amazing, and really, really happy to hear any stories that you've got. Just feel free to send them to the email in the description of any of these videos, and I will receive them and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks again. Massively appreciate it for any of you that could tune in to this one, and I'll catch you soon for another round of sci-fi horror.